Hi guys, hopefully everybody can see me and hear me. If you've never met me before, I'm Liam, and I'm going to be taking the educational session today. So we're back again for our 11 a.m. Talks, our presentations for our virtual zoo, which we've been running for a few weeks now. And this week we're doing food chains. We're talking about food chains. Now you'll have to bear with me because I've got quite a wriggly animal with me today. She might try and nibble my ears and stuff like that, but don't worry, she's not going to attack me. She's very, very friendly. But if you see me moving my head around and things like that, that's just because she's trying to nibble my ears because she's very, very cheeky. So before we get started, I'm just going to give a quick mention to our adoption packages. I'm sure if you've watched one of these before, then you'll know all about them by now. But hopefully we've got a few new people. So I'm just going to give them a quick mention just for the courtesy of those new people if we've got any. So basically, the adoption packages run and we've got quite a few different levels. Willow, stop trying to eat me. We've got quite a few different levels of the adoption packages, and basically on the highest level, you can adopt any animal you choose, and you can come in and you can meet that animal. And I think you get the opportunity to do that twice throughout the year, and you get to meet your animal one-to-one with a keeper. So it's a really, really good little thing that you can have. You pay for the adoption for 12 months. So like I say, you can choose any animal you want, and once you've actually adopted the animal, you can have the opportunity to do different things with it. So it is a really cool little package. So if you want to get involved with it, then that will be really, really good. So we're just going to speak to you a little bit about the homework that we've set you this week. So what we want you guys to do is to pick a habitat. So it can be any habitat you want. It can be, a desert habitat, a woodland, a forest, a rainforest, anything like that. And then we want you to create a food chain over the week. So, for example, if you was to choose a rainforest, the producer, so that the plant might be a tree. And then the next, so on that day you'd focus on the tree, and then the next day you'd focus on something that eats the leaves off the tree. So for example, something like an insect that would eat the leaves off the tree, and then the day after that you'd focus on something that eats the insects. So what we want you to do is basically add the next step up each day to that food chain. Now you don't have to speak about the animals that we're doing. We're not doing a food chain. So, for example, yesterday we did the uromastyx, and today we've got the skunk. A skunk wouldn't eat uromastyx, so you don't need to, do every single animal we're doing. Just make sure you're picking one habitat and sticking to it. So, for example, you wouldn't pick something that lives in the desert and then pick something that lives in the rainforest, because they're pretty much polar opposite habitats. You'd want to pick one habitat and stick to that, basically. So if you feel like that's really easy, and you can do that really easily, then we've got an extension task. So basically, in every single habitat, there's loads of different food chains. So for example, again, if we're talking about the insects that feed off the trees, then those insects would get eaten by a number of different animals. So for example, they could get eaten by, if it was in Madagascar, they could get eaten by the chameleons, or they could get eaten by the temrex. And then in turn, those animals will get eaten by different things as well. So every single animal that eats a producer usually gets eaten by a number of different animals. And that's called a food web. So if you're feeling really clever, you can try and create a food web, which basically is loads of different food chains crossed over with each other. So you don't want to do two separate food chains. You don't want to do two separate habitats. Again, stick to the same habitat and try and get it so your food chains cross over with each other, and that'll be a really cool food web. So we're just going to give you a quick recap on the food chains, again, just in case we do have any new people. I'm sure if you've listened to them earlier in the week, you know all about this by now, but just in case we've got any new ones, we'll give you a quick recap on these food chains. So in this example, we've got the grass here, that's the producer. So the producer is usually always a plant. The producer feeds off sunlight through photosynthesis. No other animals do that. No other species No animals do that, sorry, and then it's just the plants that feed off the sunlight. So they're the producers. You can have grass, you can have browse that's on the trees, you can have leaves, anything really that feeds off sunlight. And then next up you've got the primary consumer. So that's your things like your insects and stuff like that. So in terms of things that graze, they're probably primary consumers as well. So it's not just really small insects. Things, for example, like zebras, they're primary consumers because they just eat grass. But in terms of this food chain, to show you all the different levels, we're just going to stick to insects. And then the secondary consumer, that's something like a bluebird, as you can see on the picture. And then they eat the insects. The tertiary consumer is a snake, which eats the bluebird, and then the owl would eat the snake. So there is loads of different levels to it. Usually the 4 different levels are the main ones. And then, but you can have as many different levels as you see fit, really, if you want to. So, for example, you could go on to say that the bluebird gets eaten by something else, which gets eaten by the snake, which then gets eaten by something else, which then gets eaten by the owl. It doesn't just have to be 4 levels. It can be as many levels as you want it to be, as long as it makes sense and as long as that actually happens in a wild environment. So you don't just want to start making stuff up. We want an actual food chain that actually happens in the wild. So lastly, we've got the decomposers, which we're going to be speaking about at the end of the week, and they kind of like round off the cycle, if you will. So for example, once the owl is finished with his food and he passes it through, and then it comes out the other end, just like all animals have to do, then the decomposers will then feed on that, all that kind of matter. So anything that's waste, really, the decomposers are recyclers. So they recycle that, and then that in turn helps the grass, the trees, the producers, all the different plants to grow. So it's a really, really interesting little cycle, and the decomposers play a really important part because they complete the cycle. Without the decomposers, the cycle wouldn't be completed. So we're just going to give you a quick recap on these words to remember that we've spoken about in the past couple of days as well. So we've got predator, prey. So predators are animals which eat prey. Prey are animals which get eaten by predators. Carnivore, omnivore, herbivore, the 3 main feed groups in the animal kingdom. The ones that you guys should hopefully be able to remember and remember what they all mean. So carnivores just eat meat. Omnivores eat all different types of things, meat, fruit and veg. They can eat grass as well, things like that. And then herbivores, they just eat plants. So they would eat fruit and veg. They eat grass. They eat trees. So they basically just eat plants. And then there's a few more. The harder words to grasp. So you don't have to remember these ones, but if you can remember them, then that would be really cool as well. So we've got insectivore, detritivore, frugivore, piscivore, fungivore, and vermivore. So all of these all eat different types of things as well. So if you can remember them, excellent, but try your best to remember the main 4 that are at the top of the screen. So we're going to introduce you to Willow now. And Willow is quite a strange animal. She's something that people aren't that keen on, but she is very, very friendly and she's very, very cute. So there's a little face. There she is, sniffing the camera. So as it says on the bottom, she's not that stinky. She isn't stinky at all. She has got the ability to be stinky if she wants to, by just lifting up her tail like this and spraying everybody. But she's not going to do that because she doesn't feel scared. She doesn't feel threatened. So they only really do it when they feel under threat quite a lot. And that's because they don't want to waste it. So the best way to describe a skunk spray is that basically it has to recharge. So what she doesn't want to do is she doesn't want to use it when she doesn't need to. And then, say, for example, in a couple of days, if she was in a real threat, which she won't be because she lives in a zoo, but she's not aware of that. if there was a real threat in a couple of days, she wouldn't then be able to use her spray. So it has to basically refill and recharge. So if she wants to make sure, she definitely needs to use it. So that's why I'm comfortable handling her. She's very, very friendly, and I'm 100% sure she isn't going to spray me. So in terms of Willow's food chain, it's very, very complicated, and that's because she's an omnivore. So if you remember on the last slide, we've spoken about what an omnivore means, and it basically means they eat anything they want to. So she can eat meat, she can eat veg, she can eat plants, she could even probably bark if she wanted to, wouldn't be very tasty. She can eat insects, she can eat mushrooms, she can eat loads of different things. And the reason these guys get such a bad reputation is because in North America where they live, they actually go through people's bins and they try and find food out of the bins. And that's because in the wild, it's quite hard finding food. You've got to forage quite a lot, especially in the winter months where it's much colder. You've got to forage for food, you've got to hunt for food and stuff like that. And these guys will spend like pretty much all their time foraging for food when they're not sleeping. So if they're going through people's garbage, through people's rubbish bins in America, they're finding it much easier to find food because humans waste food all the time. So if she can go up to a bin and find some leftover chicken or a beef burger or pizza, she's going to eat that. It might not be very good for her, but there's loads of fat in that, and it's really easy. It doesn't run off. She doesn't really have to search for it that much. So she's definitely going to eat that. Now, that's not part of the natural food chain, so I don't want you guys start, drawing pizza in the food chains and stuff like that. That's definitely not something we want you to do. In terms of a natural food chain, she's basically going to be foraging for insects mainly, but she'd also eat plants like shoots and leaves and stuff, and also small mammals like mice and amphibians as well. So they like to eat frogs. Frogs are a nice tasty meal if they can get hold of them. But the main bulk of the diet really comes from insects. So they try and get the bigger insects if they can. And if they really hit the jackpot, they'll find a beehive. So the stings don't really affect them the same way they affect us. They probably do hurt a little bit, but they're not going to swell up or anything like that. So they will literally just go into a beehive, use the long claws that they've got to tear the beehive up. They'll eat the bees, which is a nice tasty meal, but they'll also get the honey as well, and they absolutely love honey. So bees are a really cool one to include in your food chain if you want to. So if we're focusing on the bees, then their producer is plants because they use the pollen. So what they do is they go into the plant, they collect all the pollen, they'll eat some of the nectar that's in the plant as well, and then they'll fly up to the hive and then make honey. And then the skunk will come, they'll rip the hive open, they'll eat the bees, they'll eat the honey, and they'll walk off and they'll go and look for other things to eat. Now, it's not only the skunk the skunk's not just a trailblazer that goes around the North American woodland eating everything in sight. There are things that will eat the skunk as well. The skunk isn't the apex predator. Even though the spray makes it a little bit more complicated for things to eat the skunk, they do still get eaten. If an animal that's bigger than a skunk tries to eat it, a carnivore in North America tries to eat it, and it gets sprayed, it's not gonna like it very much, so it's probably gonna run off. But then, as I said, that spray has to recharge. So if something else tries to eat it, and the skunk can't spray it, then the skunk's definitely going to get eaten by that thing. So half of the time, skunks are really well protected because of the spray. It's a really, really cool defense mechanism. And the other half, they aren't very well protected. Now, 100% of the time, they're very well protected. They're not very well protected from great horned owls. And that's because these owls, they don't have a very good sense of smell. So it's not really true to say they don't have a sense of smell at all, because they can taste, so they must have some sort of sense of smell. But it's really, really, really poor sense of smell. So even a skunk spray, which smells awful, they can't smell that. So great horned owls will definitely be a predator of the skunk. So that's one thing that the skunk can't really protect themselves from. So a great horned owl is something really, really cool to put into your food chains. But you can also put things like bears. Black bears will definitely try and eat her. Things like mountain lions, so cougars or pumas, they're also called that. They'll definitely try and eat her as well. Foxes will try and eat her as well. But also, strangely enough, not parrots, that was Milo. Badgers, sorry, there we go. So yeah, badgers will actually, so American badgers will actually try and eat skunks as well, even though they're the same size. So you might think it's quite a fair contest between a badger and a skunk. Skunks are solitary, so they live on their own. Badgers actually live in groups. Loads of badgers, so 3, 4, 5 badgers against one skunk, and the badgers will get a nice tasty meal. So even though Willow has the spray, if she was a wild skunk, she would definitely be in trouble, because there are loads and loads of different things that would love to eat her in the wild. So there's loads of different options that you can use in your food chain if you want to include a skunk in your food chain. So yeah, you can talk about the insects, you can talk about the bees, you could talk about fungi that she eats as well if you want to. And then in terms of what she gets eaten by, there's loads of different options for that as well. So you could even make a food web with the skunk if you wanted to, because there's lots of different things in North America that will contribute to that food web really, really well. So it's a really good animal to focus your food chain or food web on, really. So we're going to go through a quick recap of what we've spoken about. So we introduced you to Willow, who's a secondary consumer, and that's because she eats the insects and the small mammals and things like that. So your homework is to create a food chain for your chosen habitat. So if you've already chosen your habitat and it's not woodland, don't worry, you don't have to do a skunk. Or if you want to do another one with woodland because you've really enjoyed this talk and you think a skunk would be a really good one to do, which I agree with, it would be a really good one to do, then you can send us more than one in. There's really no there's no limit on how much you can send in, really. We really, really appreciate all the interaction with these talks, so it would be good if you could send them in for us. So the final slide, we're just going to give a quick thanks to a few people. So Nikki and Chris and Elisma, they've donated to our fundraiser, and that wasn't through the crowdfunding link. They donated to Melissa personally, which was really, really appreciated. So yeah, you don't have to go through the crowdfunding link to donate. If you don't want to, you can PayPal Melissa, or if you know the company personally, if you know Melissa personally, you can go and give Melissa the cash hand to hand, and she'll make sure that goes into the pot for the fundraiser. For those of you who don't know what the fundraiser is, it's basically something that we've set up just because we don't have any income at the minute, because obviously we go out to schools and things like that, and it's really, really hard for us to get any money in at the minute, just because of the lockdown. And even though the lockdown's easing, it's not it's not easing for us just yet. I feel like we'll be lucky to be able to go out to schools for the rest of the year, really. So if we're only looking at going back out next year, which hopefully, fingers crossed, that'll be earlier, but obviously we don't know what's going to happen. It's impossible to guess. Then we're gonna really struggle for the rest of the year. So this crowdfunder is our main source of income at the minute. So if you guys can spare even just a little bit, however much you'd spend on, a bottle of wine or a bag of crisps, something like that, it will be really, really appreciated. So hopefully everybody's enjoyed the talk today, and they've enjoyed meeting Willow. Sorry that you didn't get to see too much of her, but she is very, very wriggly. And tomorrow you're back with Stacey, and you'll be talking about the apex predators. And then after that on Friday, you're back with me, and we're talking about the decomposers. So we've got a couple more streams for you this week. Hopefully you guys are, working hard on your food chains and your food webs and stuff. The link to the food chains and the food webs is on our Facebook page. It was posted on Monday, so you might have to scroll through a little bit to find it. So we're not posting one every day this week. We're just posting one on Monday. So yeah, hopefully you guys will be able to post on that for us. Cheers for listening, guys. Thank you.